Hello YouTube, this is Freshnez from eGaming Television bringing you a Season 6 Patch 6.9 guide, and in this one we're covering top lane Irelia, the Will of the Blades.
My blade is at your service.
For more of our guides, you guys can go to our website, which is www.egamingtv.com. If you also do wish to talk to us, you can go to our Twitter, which is at egaming_TV. Twitter is where we do all of our skin giveaways, so if you do want to enter for those, you do need to follow us on Twitter, so make sure you head over there and follow us if you want skins. So let's start our Irelia guide by looking at her pros and cons. When you add up all of her pros, she has high damage with a CC and a gap closer. She's also got some of the best lane sustain in the entire game due to her W. This ability passively gives her health on hit, which doubles when you activate the W, and even gives some true damage. This is a great ability to have in the lane phase considering you are a squishy melee champion early on. Because of her high damage, gap closer, and CC, she also has high snowball potential. She only needs a few offensive items to do a ridiculous amount of damage. Once she acquires these items, she can then go into a tanky build and be really hard to bring down. With her passive, she even has built-in tenacity. This means when you do get CC'd by the enemy team, you just simply break out quicker based on the amount of champions near you. Late game, she becomes a high damage, tanky champion who can be really hard to deal with. Since you are top lane, you can also take teleport, so you're able to split push. There's not many champions in the game that can deal with Irelia 1v1 if you do have a bunch of items. Irelia's first con is that she's squishy early on. Due to the fact that Trinity Force is so amazing on Irelia, we almost always have to rush that item first. There are some Ginsu first builds out there which are also very good, but as you notice, both always start with an offensive item. This means if you are facing something that can bully people like say Darius, you may have a lot of trouble early on. You of course can get a Randuin's or something if you wanted early on to help deal with this, but then you'd end up doing no damage and you wouldn't really have snowball potential. Later on you do eventually get some tanky items, so this isn't a problem, but early on it is kind of annoying. Another con Irelia has is that she has to dive into teams. Now, of course, most melee champions have to do this, but Irelia, like I said, is squishy in the early and mid game, so you may end up dying rather fast. Irelia also needs items for her power spike. As previously stated, Trinity Force is an amazing item on Irelia, and she is pretty shitty until she obtains it. At this point, she will do tons of damage, but she will die really fast, so she also needs some sort of tanky items to deal with the opposing team to be effective. As Irelia, you usually want to pick up a couple items as soon as possible, then start roaming the map as you become much more effective at dealing with enemy champions. For our Masteries on Irelia, we go 18 Ferocity and 12 Resolve. As our Keystone Mastery, we take Fervor of Battle as it is incredible damage output for Irelia. When we are going through the mastery tree, we focus on getting as much damage and lane sustain as possible. Irelia's lane sustain is already incredible because of her W, but by adding even more, it can be insanely hard to push out of the lane unless you are a hard counter. The great thing about this is that she doesn't even have that many hard counters because of all the sustain she does have and the built-in escape kind of from her Q depending on where minions are. She is rather safe in the lane at all times. There are a few champions in the game that can give Irelia a hard time in top lane, and we will discover which ones those are later on in the guide. For our runes, we get 9 greater marks of attack damage, 9 greater seals of armor, 9 greater glyphs of magic resist, and 3 greater quintessences of attack speed. In total, this equals 13.5% attack speed, 8.55 attack damage, 12 magic resist, and 9 armor. With this rune setup, we get a lot of attack speed, which works really nice with our Fervor of Battle Keystone Mastery. We also get the attack damage, so we can output a lot of damage and last hit just a little bit easier. We then get the armor and magic resist, so we are somewhat tanky and don't take a ton of damage when we're in the lane or getting ganked. The nice thing about this rune page is the fact that it is the same as AD Carry's rune page. That means if you are an AD Carry player and you want to start learning top lane, you'll already have the runes, which is an awesome thing to have. If you're also limited on the rune pages you do have, you can also play a top laner and a bunch of AD carries with just one single rune page, which is a really nice thing to have when you're starting out. Irelia is a great split pusher and can bring a lot to teleport ganks, so therefore we take teleport and flash. Flash has a lot of defensive and offensive uses. This can allow you to escape from champions or can be used to chase opponents if needed. It's also really nice because you can combo your flash with your Blade Surge to close a large gap and get onto an enemy, which is fairly far away. Flash, of course, is an insanely strong summoner spell, and no matter what champion it is on, you will see Flash listed, and Irelia obviously is no exception. So like I said before, Irelia is a really strong split pusher, so Teleport is by far the best choice for her. There could be some situations where there are multiple champions who do abuse healing, so you may want to get Ignite in those situations if you don't have them on your team, but usually you want Teleport. Teleport will allow you to push lanes and still be able to make it to your team if a fight does happen. If you don't need to help your team, you're able to simply push your lane and hopefully take objectives, giving your team a big advantage when your group needs to push their base. With all of those out of the way, we're going to look at each of Irelia's abilities, starting with her passive, which is called Ionian Fervor. Irelia reduces the duration of crowd control against her by either 10, 25, or 40% when near one or more visible enemy champions, and the range is 1200. It is worth noting that Tenacity Boots, aka Merc Treads, do stack with this. Stuff like the Tenacity, Mastery, and Elixir of Iron also work with this, they do all stack. Now of course I've showed you the Mastery page and we don't get the Tenacity Mastery, but it is worth mentioning because some people may want to go down that tree. We do have the option to get an Elixir of Iron, so maybe we will get that later on when we are maxed out and have even more Tenacity. Late game, Irelia can hard carry games, so sitting in crowd control for a less amount of time can be an amazing thing to have. You are rather tanky, so usually you can survive those low duration CCs and get into team fights and heal up with your W, deleting them at the same time. This isn't a huge deal when you are in lane phase against one single champion, although of course sitting in crowd control for 10% less is nice, but in team fights it is an amazing passive. Irelia's Q is called Blade Surge and it can be used to either engage on an enemy or to escape from one. Irelia dashes to the target enemy, dealing physical damage and applying on-hit effects. Physical damage of the ability is between 20 and 140 plus 120% AD, which is a really nice ratio. Now, if Blade Surge does kill a target, it refunds 35 mana and resets its cooldown, which is a huge part of the ability, and I'll go into that in a second. The range is 650, the cost is between 50 and 70 mana, and the cooldown goes from 14 to 6 seconds at max rank. One reason this ability is great is just for last hitting minions. It has some nice base damage as it levels, and it has nice AD ratio, so it can finish off enemies rather easily. Since it resets, if you are hitting multiple low enemies, you can spam this ability throughout all of them and get all of the last hits. This ability, of course, can be used to close a gap on an enemy champion, which makes it a great engaged utility, and there's actually two ways to do this. If you wish to just go in for a quick trade, you can Q to an enemy minion, killing it so it will refresh the cooldown and engage onto your enemy champion. You can then follow up with some damage with your E and W, and then Q to another enemy minion far away so you don't get damage traded onto you. Now this can only be used on enemy minions and not your own minions, so you have to keep that in mind when you are fighting the enemy champion. This is only a reliable escape if enemy minions are behind you. If you have only your own minions, you obviously cannot use this as an escape. You can still, of course, try to escape by going forward into enemy minions and kiting the enemy champion, so it can be still great when you are in those situations. This is a great ability on Irelia, however it's still not as good as her W and E, so we still, even though it is amazing, have to max this one last. Irelia's W is her main ability, and it is called Hit Tin Style. Now this is a very basic ability to understand. Passively, it heals her, and when you activate it, it heals for twice as much and does some true damage. The passive heal just makes her have a lot more lane sustain than a normal champion would in the top lane, and it is really hard to bully her out of the lane. When you do get really low, you can simply activate this, keep hitting minions, and you are healing for twice as much. This is also a great ability when you are fighting enemy champions, as you do get up to 75 bonus true damage. When you are in the top lane, you are generally against tanky champions, and just having that extra true damage can be great when they are stacking armor against you. Because you do get all this true damage, Irelia only really needs 2 damage items to still do a ton of damage in team fights. The cooldown is somewhat long at 15 seconds, but it also lasts 6 seconds, so it can last a long duration in a team fight. Now, like I said before, since this is a high amount of lane sustain and it is some nice true damage, we do max this ability first. Irelia's last basic ability is her E, which is called Equilibrium Strike. This is a really strong ability, considering it can either slow for 60% or provide a stun. So Irelia pierces the target enemy, dealing them magic damage and slowing them by 60% for a short duration. If her current health percentage is equal to or less than her target, she stuns them instead. It also actually has a nice base damage between 80 and 240, but it does have an AP ratio, which is only 50%. The disable duration does, however, go up as we level it. It starts at 1 second and ends up at 2 seconds. It gains 0.25 seconds per rank up. The range of the ability is 425, so it's not exactly melee range, which is nice as well. The cost is between 50 and 70 mana, and the cooldown is just 8 seconds. So you mainly want to use this ability when you are either equal health or less health than your opponent, as of course you would rather have a stun than a slow. If you are equal health, you can jump to a minion, hoping the enemy champion will hit you, so you will have a slightly less health and you will be able to stun them instead of slow them. You can then do a bunch of damage with your W, and then if you did reset your Q off the minion, hop away after if you can't win that trade by just standing there. Now, although this ability is based off AP, it does still have high base damage, and the disable duration goes up as you level it, so we max it second. Some people that are against enemy champions that are rather squishy and are very easy lane matchups will still max this one first over the W, as it can provide a nice duration disable and a lot of damage to kill the enemy champion. In almost all cases, however, I will max the W first. The lane sustain and that true damage is just too strong to pass up. Now we arrive at Irelia's ultimate, which is called Transcendent Blades. So Irelia summons 4 Spirit Blades and fires one in a line towards the cursor, dealing physical damage to all enemies it passes through. The physical damage per blade is between 80 and 160 base, plus 50% AP and 60% bonus AD. Transcendent Blades can be then cast 3 more times, as it did say you do get 4 total, at no additional cost to fire each of Irelia's remaining blades, incurring a 0.5 second delay in between each cast. Each blade also heals Irelia for 25% of the damage it deals to enemy champions and 10% of the damage it deals to enemy minions and monsters. The range is 1000, the cost is 100 mana, remember you only have to pay that once, and the cooldown is between 70 and 50 seconds, which is rather short for an ultimate. So there is 2 different ways to actually use this ability. The first one is of course to be used when you are fighting enemy champions. Now the reason this ability is actually so great is every time you do cast this, your Trinity Force procs. That means every 0.5 seconds, which you don't even attack that fast, you can get an extra Trinity Force proc. So when you are engaging on an enemy champion, you can basically always have Trinity Force for every basic auto attack, and you will be doing ridiculous amounts of damage. The great thing about this as well is you're going to be healing for 25% of that damage as well, and it's actually decent. 60% bonus AD is rather high for something you can use 4 friggin' times. The other use of the ability is just, of course, on enemy minions. You can shoot this quickly through enemy minion waves if you do wish to push a lane as fast as possible. If you're getting abused by the enemy opponent as well, you can shoot these through minions, gaining a lot of health considering you can hit them all at the same time. Pre-Trinity Force, this ability isn't that great, but as long as you know how to use this with your Trinity Force effectively, it can actually add a shitload of damage to Irelia. With all of the abilities covered, we're going to look at the ability leveling order so you know when to take each ability. Like every other ultimate in the game, you do take her ultimate at level 6, 11, and 16, basically whenever you have the opportunity to take the ultimate level. Next comes your W, which is high 10 style. You take it at 2, 4, 5, 7, and 9. It offers a lot of damage in fights, and it has great sustain, which makes it great, obviously, in the top lane. You follow it up with your Equilibrium Strike, which is your E. You take it at 3, 8, 10, 12, and 13. You want as many levels as possible, so your duration of your CC does go up. Finally is your Gap Closer, which is your Blade Surge, and is your Q. You take it at 1, 14, 15, 17, and 18. Now you may want to take your E at level 1, it does depend on your lane matchup. If you're against something that really wants to abuse you, like say a Darius, you will want to take your E at level 1. He'll be trying to put as much pressure on you as possible, so when he does so, you'll be able to stun him and walk away. You'll just have to really know which opponents you can beat and which you can't beat. If it's something hard, take your E. If it's something relatively easy, take your Q. Irelia's item build starts with a Corrupting Potion and Warding Totem. The Corrupting Potion will just add some nice lane sustain in the early game until she gets her W going, so it's a great item to have in the early game. There are two main builds for Irelia. There is the Trinity Force build and there is the Ginsu's build. I personally like to play my Irelia tanky, so I usually go for the Trinity Force build, but there will be situations where you don't have much damage on your team and you need to go for Ginsu's. These situations, of course, will be when you do have a tanky jungler like, say, a Maokai, and a tanky support like a Braum. You may be lacking a lot of damage, so you may want to go for the Ginsu's, like I did say. So the first back when you are going for Trinity Force will be the Sheen, Phage, and Boots, and when going for Ginsu's, it'll be the Pickaxe, Blasting Wand, and Boots as well. Now you can see both builds on your screen, so I'll only really talk about the differences in each build. The first thing you'll probably notice is that Trinity Force, whether you're going for the Ginsu's build or not, is in both builds because it's by far one of the strongest items on Irelia. You have to get it, basically, no matter what build you're going for. Basically, in the Trinity Force build, you are getting a Guardian Angel, and in the Ginsu's, you are basically trading that away for more damage, which is in the Ginsu's. So the generic full build will be the Trinity Force because it obviously, like I said before, does work insanely good in Irelia's kit since it procs each time you use the ultimate. Now, although she does have reduced crowd control from her passive, we still generally get Merc Treads to break that down even farther. Since you already have a nice amount of tenacity, you of course can get any boots you do prefer over these ones. It doesn't really matter too much on Irelia, I just like having as much CC reduction as possible. To add some nice offensive and defensive stats, we then get a Sterax Gauge. The shield it procs can avoid us getting bursted down, and it adds some nice flat AD, so it just adds a bit more damage to us. You then move into Spirit Visage, which is a great item on Irelia, considering she does have some nice healing in her own kit. This will give her some health and cooldown reduction, some nice magic resist, and that increased healing, of course. Now we need some armor and health, so we do move into the Dead Man's Plate. It's got some nice defensive stats, and the passive it does provide is just a really nice thing to have as well on Irelia, considering she does roam around a lot. Finally, in the Trinity Force build, we get a Guardian Angel. It's just obviously a nice thing to have as it has a lot of armor and magic resist, and you get to come back to life, which is, of course, a great thing to have in a team fight. As previously stated, you do trade the Guardian Angel for a Ginsu's in the other build. You, of course, get more damage, but you lack some defensive stats. For our alternatives, we do have a bunch of items on Irelia, considering she does itemize very, very well. So we do have two armor alternatives, which are the Randuin's and the Frozen Heart. And yes, I know, this is the old Frozen Heart picture, but hey, it's just what I had. You could replace the Dead Man's Plate if you did want, or if you were against a full AD team, of course, replace the Spirit Visage with either one of these items. If you were against a high AP team, you could, however, replace the Dead Man's Plate with one of our MR alternatives. The Banshee's Veil adds some straight up magic resist with a shield that blocks an ability, which can be very, very handy against a lot of different champions. If we wanted some more attack damage and MR, we could take the Maw or the Wit's End. Both are great items on Irelia. Finally, if you were against a very tanky team, you could get the Blade of the Ruined King so you could actually bring all of those champions down. So this is a new page we're adding to our guide, and it is the hard matchups page. Now some of these you may not consider hard counters or anything, but these are percentages I have found around some League of Legends sites, so these are the champions that she does lose lane to most often. So the first one is Volibear, and the main reason he's a hard matchup is because you can't actually kill the son of a bitch. Now, in this matchup, you may want to take Ignite as opposed to Teleport, but not having Teleport is a big disadvantage for your team. Now, you of course can get Grievous Wounds, but I don't really like to do that till later on when you have Trinity Force and some defensive stats. In a straight up fight, he will outdamage you, even if you do have your W on, and he can flip you if he is coming in with a jungler to gank you. The best thing you can do against Volibear is when he is charging you, it is based on his basic attack range, so you can still stun him with your E as long as, of course, he is higher health than you. Try to do this whenever you can, and try to kite him with your Q using his own minions. Trundle's the next hardest matchup, and Irelia has a 44.85% win rate against Trundles. Trundle pretty much counters every tanky top in the game, and Irelia is no exception. He will use his ultimate to steal your stats and then try to hold you there with his pillar. The best thing you can do is remain near some of his minions so you can kite around his pillar if possible. He can use his pillar to push you against a wall, so it is really hard to walk around and you may not be able to get to the minions. So make sure you are not against walls so he can hold you in those positions. You may want to skip a couple points in your W so you can get a longer duration stun on him so you can walk around the pillar. Irelia's next lowest win rate is against Garen, and it's 46.33%. Now this isn't the hardest matchup, but it can be annoying if you don't really know what you're doing. If you're letting him get off his Q silence over and over again and he's spinning on you, then you're going to lose that lane because you can't stun him and walk away from his spin. Your E, however, does have a longer range than, of course, his basic auto attack, so you can stun him before he actually gets to you. Make sure you do this, activate your abilities, and you can out-trade him, and if you do need to, you can Q away to a minion since you won't be silenced. This matchup is a pretty much don't get silenced, and you can out-trade him by just basic auto attacking. Next listed is the pretty OP right now, Echo, which is a 46.60% win rate. This matchup is a pretty much just dodge all of his skill shots matchup. Echo is strong in the top lane considering he does have a ability which is based off the target's missing health, so he does kind of have an execute. He also has a gap closer, a CC, and a poke. He has basically everything you'd want to have in a somewhat tanky AP champion. Just make sure you're not getting stunned by his W and you're not engaging him when he has a huge shield on himself. As long as you dodge that ability and his time winder, you should be fine. As long as you can dodge those abilities, it's rather simple. Let him use his abilities, make sure he doesn't have a shield, and then you can easily out-trade him when he doesn't have his abilities. So that pretty much covers it for this guide. If you guys did like it, please like and subscribe as we have tons and tons of League of Legends content coming out in the near future. You can also talk to us on Twitter at egaming_TV, and we do all of our giveaways there, so make sure you follow us and you can enter for those. We're also starting a Let's Play channel, so I will link that in the description as well. If anybody does enjoy Let's Plays, make sure you go over there and send us a follow. Our first video on that channel will be going up today. Thanks again for watching, and happy Mother's Day to any of the mothers out there.